Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the shattered nightscape of the 41st millennium, hope is a dangerous thing. It is hunted, burned, buried beneath layers of dogma and fire. The Imperium thrives on fear, obedience, and blind faith in a god who has not spoken in 10,000 years. But there are whispers. Heretical, fragile whispers of something impossible. Beings born of silence, untouched by the warp, children of the Emperor himself. Not demigods forged in labs, but true sons. Sensei. Outlaws to the ecclesiarchy, ghosts to the Inquisition, to some, a myth. To others, the only real path to salvation. If they exist, they are hunted. If they don't, the lie is so potent that generations have died believing it. Either way, the mere idea of them cracks open the brittle shell of imperial truth. For if the Emperor had children, and if those children walk among us still, then everything we know about him, about sacrifice, about the Imperium begins to collapse. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Maybe it needs to collapse. Maybe the only future worth having lies in the secret bloodline of a god who never wanted to be one. The Sensei are a whisper that refuses to die, not just among rogue scholars and heretics, but in the very bones of the Imperium's psychic silence. They are said to be the sons of the Emperor, but not like the Primarchs. No, the Sensei are something different. They are men, born naturally from mortal women, sired by the master of mankind during his long secret life before the Great Crusade. Not lab-forged, in gene vats, or hurled across the galaxy by foul warp storms. These are not strategic weapons. They are blood. They are legacy. And that makes them terrifying. Unlike the Primarchs whose genetic heritage was magnified to mythic extremes, the Sensei are born human, but immortal. They do not age, their minds do not weaken, they do not succumb to disease or corruption. Most crucially, they are psychic blanks. To daemons, they are voids. To psychers, they are pain. This rare anti-psychic trait alone makes them objects of terror for the warp-drenched Inquisition and a potential key to humanity's survival. Yet the sheer idea that the Emperor, the God Emperor, could sire offspring in any traditional sense is a theological nightmare. It implies mortality, fallibility, flesh. The ecclesiarchy teaches that the Emperor transcends all such frailties. If he had sons, and if those sons are immune to chaos, then the foundation of the imperial religion becomes not just shaky, but heretical. The Sensei are said to be unaware of their origins for most of their lives. They grow up as humans do, bearing no marks of divine origin. And yet, fate follows them. They gather allies, repel daemons, destroy cults, live centuries without change. In a galaxy gripped by decay and madness, they are calm centers of inexplicable order. Many wander alone. Others are rumored to be drawn together by unseen forces, converging like threads of fate. Some speculate that this is the will of the Star Child, the reborn soul of the Emperor gestating in the warp, awaiting the time when his sons will unite and offer themselves in sacrifice to catalyze his resurrection. This is not official doctrine. It is heresy of the highest order. But the whispers persist, that the Sensei walk among us, that they feel drawn to one another, that they instinctively reject the madness of the Imperium, not out of rebellion, but out of a deep, unspoken truth echoing in their blood. That they are more than men and less than gods, and that they are waiting for something, or someone. What makes the Sensei so chilling is how deeply human they are. They are not towering warriors clad in ceramite and gold. They bleed, they fear, they question, but they do not break. They stand as a mirror, not just to the Emperor's past, but to what he might have wanted for the future. If the Primarchs were his war, then perhaps the Sensei are his peace. If the Imperium was built on sacrifice and control, maybe the Sensei are its unintended counterbalance. Self-determined, unshackled, and immune to the corruption of gods. And perhaps this is the greatest heresy of all, that the Emperor may have left behind not just a throne of gold, but a legacy of hope. One not clad in iron, but in flesh. The Star Child theory is one of the most radical, enigmatic, and spiritually charged concepts ever whispered in the shadowed corners of the Imperium. To most of the faithful, it is anathema. A foul mutation of theology that dares to speak of the Emperor not as an eternal, unyielding god upon the golden throne, but as a soul in transition. According to this suppressed belief, the Emperor is not merely decaying, he is shedding. His physical husk rots, yes, but his psychic essence, immense beyond comprehension, has begun to drift, to gestate, to become something new. something pure, a being beyond the tyranny of gods and demons alike. This is the Star Child. In this radical framework, the Emperor's death is not the end, but a spiritual metamorphosis. He dies not in failure, but in fulfillment, shedding his mortal coil to be reborn as a truly divine being, free from the shackles of flesh, throne, and worship. The Star Child is this unborn god, forming like a luminous embryo in the warp, untouched by chaos. It is not a return to what the Emperor was, but a leap into what he was always meant to be. And the Sensei, those mythic, blank-souled children, are the necessary agents of that rebirth. The theory goes deeper, darker, and more sacrificial. The Sensei, when united, are meant to offer themselves, all of them, in a ritual of psychic annihilation. They must die, together, willingly, in a sacred act of spiritual fuel. Their deaths, willingly embraced, would light the final flame needed to birth the Star Child fully into existence. This is not metaphor. This is the core of their supposed destiny. A death not of despair, but of purpose. They are not saviors in the traditional sense, but living sacrifices, uncorrupted and pure, the Emperor's true legacy forged in silence and suffering. It is hard to overstate how blasphemous this concept is to the Orthodox imperial creed. To suggest that the Emperor is not a god already, but in the process of becoming one, tears at the very fabric of the ecclesiarchy's power. It suggests that worship is premature, even harmful, that the god Emperor is not yet finished and may never ascend fully unless these forbidden rituals are completed. This turns the entire cathedral of faith into a tomb, one built too early, too arrogantly. The imperial cult imprisons the Emperor's soul in golden chains of adoration, stalling the very apotheosis they claim to revere. Worse still, the Star Child theory implies that salvation does not lie in obedience, sacrifice, or war, but in love, in unity, in the deepest act of selfless death by those who are already deathless. The Sensei would be the ultimate antithesis to the Imperium, pure where it is corrupt, willing where it is oppressive, silent where it is screaming. If the God Emperor's rebirth hinges on them, then the endless sacrifices of the Astra Militarum, the penitent suffering of the Sisters of Battle, and the aeons of devotion from billions, all of it may be futile, glorious, but meaningless. This vision of the future is radiant and terrifying. A new God of humanity, born not in fire and conquest, but in quiet, starbound agony. A God not of dominion, but of renewal. The Star Child is not just a metaphysical curiosity. It is the only real alternative to the death spiral of the Imperium. But to embrace this vision, even in thought, is to walk the edge of heresy. It means betraying the Emperor's current form in hopes of a future no one can prove. It is, in the deepest sense, an act of faith. The one thing the ecclesiarchy claims to uphold, and yet fears the most. In the vast sprawl of Warhammer 40,000 lore, few concepts sit more precariously between canon and apocrypha than the Sensei. They are the ghosts of old editions, relics of the rogue trader era, long banished to the apocryphal margins. But their lingering presence speaks volumes. Why were they introduced, and more importantly, why were they quietly discarded? This tension between what is officially acknowledged and what remains buried in the black archives of lore is central to understanding both the Sensei and the Imperium itself. In early Warhammer lore, especially during the freewheeling days of the late 1980s and early 1990s, the universe was more experimental, more philosophical. The idea of the Sensei and the Star Child emerged during this time, proposing a cosmic cycle of death and rebirth for the Emperor, intertwined with a hidden bloodline immune to chaos. These narratives had a mythic resonance, echoing spiritual traditions from real-world religions, avatars, bodhisattvas, messianic figures. But as Warhammer 40k evolved, particularly after the turn of the millennium, Games Workshop began refining and tightening the tone of its universe. What once was spiritual and mysterious became authoritarian and brutal. And so, the Sensei were quietly erased. Not retconned with a definitive statement, not slain in a definitive battle, not revealed as hoaxes, just omitted. Their stories were never updated, their mechanics vanished from the tabletop, their metaphysical significance was folded into silence. In the modern codices, the Sensei are not even mentioned. Not as myth, not as heresy, just absent. As if to acknowledge them would lend them strength. As if their very ambiguity was too dangerous to preserve. This raises a fascinating meta-narrative, because in universe, the Imperium is a machine built on suppression, of knowledge, of innovation, of truth, and out of universe, the development of the lore mirrors that suppression. The Sensei, then, are not just a lost concept. They are a casualty of the same grimdark ethos that defines the Imperium itself. To know them is to remember a time when hope, however strange, had a place in the galaxy. Their removal isn't just editorial, it's thematic. It reflects a galaxy that can no longer tolerate even the idea of hidden children bearing salvation. But they were never truly erased from the hearts of fans. Because the concept of the Sensei lingers in those marginal corners of narrative, in the way some characters refuse to age, in mysterious psychic voids and inexplicable resistances to chaos. In community forums and fan theories, they are resurrected again and again, reimagined through the lens of modern lore. Could Vulcan be a Sensei? Could the Grey Knights unknowingly harbor one? Could the Star Child be gestating behind the Astronomicon, drawing these lost sons back home? It is precisely because the Sensei are apocryphal that they remain so powerful. Their non-canonical status makes them immune to doctrinal rigidity. They are vessels into which fans pour fear, hope, rebellion, and speculation. They are anti-lore, not in opposition to the setting, but in defiance of its stagnation. A hidden stream running beneath the poisoned rivers of canon. Their exclusion is not proof of falsehood, but perhaps evidence of deeper, more disturbing truth the Imperium and its creators would rather leave buried. To believe in the Sensei is to step outside the catechism of modern Warhammer. It is to embrace the older, stranger spirit of the setting, where gods could die and their sons could walk unknown through the stars, bearing not weapons, but destiny. The Imperium is a fortress of lies built upon an ocean of fire, and few truths could shatter its walls faster than the existence of the Sensei. If it is true, if these immortal children of the Emperor walk among humanity, then the question must be asked, why hasn't the Imperium embraced them? The answer is as brutal as it is predictable, because the Sensei are a threat, not just to the ecclesiarchy's theology, but to the very structure of imperial power. Their existence would unravel the dogma that holds the Imperium together like rusted iron wire. First, consider the cornerstone of the imperial creed. The Emperor is a god, eternal, infallible, beyond flesh. If he sired children through mortal means, then that implies biology, desire, humanity. A god with offspring is no longer a remote celestial being, but a figure who walked, loved, perhaps even erred. That is theological dynamite. It collapses the hierarchy of sainthood and prayer and renders the great cathedrals of Terra empty of meaning. If the Emperor had sons, then perhaps he was not a god when he ruled, but only became one in death. And if he can change, evolve, even reincarnate, then he is not fixed and eternal. That undercuts everything the ecclesiarchy teaches. But it goes beyond religion. The Imperium functions through control. It is a brutal bureaucracy of stagnation, where tradition is weaponized and deviation is death. The Sensei are inherently deviant. They are unpredictable, uncontrollable, and worst of all, inspirational. They resist psychic influence. They resist corruption. They live centuries and defy decay. If the masses ever learned of them, the call to rally behind them would be deafening. They represent not a rebellion of armies, but of spirit. Hope made flesh. And hope is the one thing the Imperium cannot allow. In this light, the suppression of the Sensei is not just plausible, it is inevitable. The Inquisition, the ecclesiarchy, even the High Lords of Terra themselves would see their existence as a spiritual plague. Heresy is not simply deviation from dogma, it is the corrosion of control. The Sensei, by their very nature, corrode everything the Imperium stands for. To let them live is to court civil war. To let them be known is to risk revolution. Imagine the implications if even one were found and identified. Would Space Marines bend the knee to a blood son of the Emperor? Would the Adeptus Mechanicus seek to dissect him, harvest his genetic essence? Would planetary governors swear loyalty to a living heir rather than distant Terra? It is not just a theological crisis, it is an administrative apocalypse. A single Sensei could upend the balance of power across entire sectors. And so they are hidden. Not just ignored, but actively purged. Any signs, long lifespans, psychic nulls, aberrant resistance to demonic possession, are likely interpreted as threats, anomalies, or corruption. The Ordo Hereticus does not tolerate ambiguity. A sensei, when found, is likely executed without ceremony, classified under obscure security designations, and erased from record. Entire worlds may be cleansed to ensure their legacy dies with them. The irony is almost poetic. The emperor, who gave everything to preserve mankind, may have left behind a legacy that could truly save it, and that legacy is being exterminated in his name. The Imperium, in its blindness, becomes the jailer of its own salvation. The Sensei are not just suppressed because they are heretical. They are suppressed because they are necessary, and nothing frightens a dying empire more than something that might cure it. If you know where to look, and if you listen carefully, the galaxy is not silent about the Sensei. Their footprints may be faint, but they exist in the overlooked, the inexplicable, and the heretically unclassified. These aren't declarations of truth, but echoes. Rumors passed down through half-mad navigators, whispers traded in backroom Mechanicus data looms, and forbidden fragments of lore hidden in the haunted margins of inquisitorial records. The question isn't just, are the Sensei real? It's, why do so many stories, scattered across millennia and star systems, sound the same? There are tales, maddening in their consistency, of individuals who defy the warp itself. Not through training, like the Sisters of Silence, and not through artificial shielding like null fields, but intrinsically. Born with an aura of negation, these figures unravel psychic phenomena simply by being present. In more than one report, daemons are said to recoil from such people, unable to perceive or touch them. These individuals are often dismissed as untouchables, but some do not fit the known pattern. They are charismatic, not alienating. They gather others around them. They seem to guide fate without effort. In a galaxy where most blanks are feared or shunned, these rare souls are loved, even worshipped, by those who travel with them. Then there are the unaging. Reports throughout the ages describe rogue traders, mercenaries, or planetary rulers who have remained visibly unchanged for centuries. Administrative officials quietly amend records. Death dates are erased. Every few generations, these figures disappear, only to reemerge elsewhere under a new identity. Sometimes they show up at critical junctions in history, resisting demonic incursions, disrupting chaos cults, or guiding lost fleets to salvation. The Ordo Chronos was once tasked with cataloging such anomalies before they were dissolved in fire and accusation. The silence around their archives is more damning than any declaration. There are even battle records of individuals who are fatally wounded, only to be found alive and untouched days later, surrounded by the corpses of corrupted foes. These stories are always dismissed as exaggerations or local superstition, but the pattern is undeniable. Individuals without psychic signatures who exhibit improbable luck, physical resilience, and a deeply unsettling resistance to chaos. They appear, they vanish, they leave behind no fingerprints, only salvation or mystery. One recurring tale speaks of a man in plain armor, walking through a black crusade like a ghost. The Chaos Horde could not see him. Bullets would not touch him, and wherever he stepped the warp thinned, curled away like smoke in wind. He did not speak, he did not lead, but those who followed him survived. Some claim he still walks the stars, seeking others like him, always moving, always forgotten. Even within the Inquisition, some radical elements have begun to question whether certain unexplained purges and disappearances might be tied to a secret agenda. Not to eliminate threats, but to prevent truths from surfacing. A few have gone rogue, pursuing sightings across the Segmentum Pacificus and beyond, piecing together patterns that make no sense unless one accepts the unthinkable, that the Sensei are not extinct, that they are hiding. Or worse, that someone is hiding them. These aren't isolated superstitions. They are points on a map, a constellation of heresy that when traced begins to form a silhouette, a human shape, male, timeless, silent, rejected by gods and demons alike. What we have is not proof, but we do have testimony. And sometimes in a galaxy where truth is strangled at birth, testimony is all that survives. If the Sensei truly exist, it's unlikely they survive alone. The galaxy is too cruel, too vast, too precise in its violence. Any being marked by fate, especially one with a destiny as controversial as the Sensei, must find allies or die in silence. And so the rumors begin to thicken, not just about individuals, but about hidden orders. One name arises more than any other: whispered like a blade drawn in darkness, the Sensei Knights. The Sensei Knights are spoken of in tones of reverence and dread, a brotherhood of guardians formed not to conquer, but to protect. Their mission, it is said, is not to wage open war against the Imperium or chaos, but to shield the Sensei from both. They are knights without banners, warriors without praise, chosen by no god but bound by a purpose older than the Imperium itself. They operate in the cracks between history and myth, appearing only when needed, vanishing before the light of day. Where they go, lies unravel. Where they stand, fate shifts. Descriptions vary, but certain themes remain. They are psychically null, or at least partially resistant. They wear armor forged in silence, not shining, but matte, textured like ash or obsidian. Their weapons are designed not just to kill, but to silence. Void blades, phase spears, weapons that ripple with unreality. Some accounts speak of cloaks that shimmer with starlight, or helmets that flicker like broken holograms. These are not showpieces. They are the tools of an order that survives by never being seen. More than one Ordo Xenos agent has died chasing rumors of monastic enclaves hidden deep in the black between stars. Hollow moons, derelict orbital fortresses, dead pilgrim worlds. Some theorize the Sensei Knights have entire fleets built of stealth ships, too quiet even for the Mechanicus to notice. Their cells never exceed a dozen warriors. They do not recruit, they awaken. When a Sensei is found, they are not taken, they are called. It is believed that the Knights do more than protect. They prepare. They search for relics connected to the Emperor's forgotten past, ciphered manuscripts from his unrecorded years, or ancient mechanisms that could one day ignite the ritual of rebirth. Some say they seek out other Sensei to guide them, train them, or test them. Others believe they carry out assassinations, not of threats, but of those who would misuse the truth. Rogue psychers who have learned too much. Cults that misinterpret the Starchild's purpose. Even Inquisitors are not beyond their reach. Then there are the Starchild cults. Scattered across the galaxy, these hidden faiths reject the ecclesiarchy and proclaim a future rebirth of the Emperor, not as a corpse god, but as a child of light and silence. To outsiders, they appear mad, chanting forbidden litanies, painting spirals of starlight in blood, awaiting the day when the sky breaks and the true sons of the Emperor rise. But beneath their madness is an order. Many cults appear to have intimate knowledge of arcane truths, the precise moment of the Emperor's death, the names of long-lost Terran mystics, the geometries of the webway. Their rituals may be insane, but they are not random. And more than once, Imperial forces have reported these cults vanishing moments before purgation, as if warned by something or someone. The idea that the Sensei are alone is comforting, because it implies they are vulnerable. The possibility that they are sheltered by hidden orders, trained in ancient ways, and preparing for a cosmic resurrection changes everything. It suggests they are not merely wandering anomalies, but actors in a long-forgotten prophecy, a shadow play moving beneath the crust of the galaxy's collapse. The Imperium tells us that there is no hope, that the God Emperor is the final word. But these cults, these knights, these myths, they whisper of a future that has not yet spoken. And they wait. The Sensei may be children of the Emperor, but there's another lineage in the grimdark tapestry of the 41st millennium that cannot be ignored. The perpetuals. These mysterious beings scattered across time and myth share one defining trait. They do not die, not permanently. They regenerate, revive, and endure, even when burned, shattered, or atomized. In a universe where death is the default and extinction the rule, perpetuals are an affront to fate itself. And that brings us to a tantalizing crossroads. Could the Sensei be perpetuals, or are they something even stranger? At first glance, the similarities are striking. Both groups defy death, both are rare, both are tied in whispers and shadowed records to the Emperor. The most infamous perpetuals, Vulcan, the Primarch who returns from death again and again, Olanius Pius, the immortal soldier who may have stood before Horus, are steeped in mystery. The Emperor himself is widely theorized to be a perpetual, having walked Terra for tens of thousands of years before rising to unify mankind. If the Emperor is a perpetual, then it stands to reason that his natural offspring might inherit that trait. But perpetuals are not inherently immune to chaos. Vulcan, for all his resilience, is a beacon in the warp. Other known perpetuals have been hunted, manipulated, or even corrupted. The Sensei, by contrast, are defined by their null nature. They are psychic voids. No demonic gaze can pierce them. No chaos god can touch them. This places them in a strange category. They are more than mortal, like the perpetuals, but less touched by the warp than any living creature. In a setting where the warp pervades all, the Sensei are anomalies that should not exist. So what if the Sensei are a new kind of perpetual? Not just immortal in body, but deliberately designed to be spiritually clean. If the Emperor, a master of genetics and metaphysics, truly foresaw the horror of chaos, he may have crafted these children as counterweights to that future. Not as warriors, like the Primarchs, but as seeds. Each Sensei would be a beacon of stability, uncorrupted and untouchable, destined to outlast the rotting empire and carry the potential of rebirth. This would make them not simply a parallel to the perpetuals, but their evolution. Where perpetuals are nature's rare accidents, glitches in the death loop, the Sensei are purpose incarnate. They represent a deeper level of design, forged in secrecy and scattered like stars to await a time when the galaxy could no longer sustain its current truth. They may even surpass the perpetuals in cosmic significance, not merely enduring life, but destined death. A death that matters, a death that births divinity. And yet, the comparison cannot be dismissed. The perpetuals are proof that the Emperor operated in shadows long before the Imperium was born. He shaped humanity not just through war, but through clandestine projects of mythic scope. The Sensei could easily be the culmination of such a project, offspring not by accident, but by intent. Where the perpetuals are relics, the Sensei may be prototypes. Evolutionary leaps waiting in the wings, biding time, waiting to die, so something far greater can awaken. That's the paradox at the heart of the Sensei mystery. They are immortal, yet their destiny is to die. They are voids, yet they may carry within them the spark of a god. The perpetuals resist the inevitable. The Sensei embrace it. And in that embrace, they may offer the one thing the galaxy has not seen in 10,000 years: transformation. Could the Emperor have had children? In a galaxy so steeped in myth and terror, the question feels almost irreverent. A break in the iron discipline of faith, a whisper of flesh in a fortress of steel. And yet it lingers, it returns. Because beneath the golden facade of the master of mankind, beneath the armor and fire and legend, there was once a man. And men, no matter how great, have desires, vulnerabilities, and perhaps children. The Emperor walked Terra for tens of thousands of years before the Imperium existed. He wore countless faces, lived innumerable lives. As kings, scholars, warriors, prophets, he guided civilizations in secret, nudged humanity from the shadows, all in pursuit of a grander destiny. Are we to believe that in all those lifetimes he never once connected with another human being? Never loved? Never fathered? The lore doesn't speak plainly on this. It is deliberately silent. But silence in the Imperium is rarely innocence. It is almost always fear. From a biological standpoint, there is no reason the Emperor could not have sired children. His genetic mastery exceeds anything the Mechanicus can comprehend. He created the Primarchs, after all, demi-divine beings seeded from his essence, sculpted into perfection. But those were constructs, not births. They were tools, weapons. What if, before that, he tried something else? What if he allowed nature to take its course? What if he watched from afar as his children grew up without ever knowing their origin? And what if that was the point? It is tempting to think the Emperor might have kept such offspring close, trained them, prepared them. But that would make them vulnerable to corruption, to assassination, to exploitation by his enemies. No, if he created the Sensei, he would have hidden them completely. He would have scattered them, anonymized them, allowed them to blend into humanity. They would be born across centuries, on different worlds, from different mothers. A secret species, immune to the warp, maturing in silence. This paints the Emperor not just as a warlord or god, but as a father in the most cosmic sense. One who plants seeds not for harvest, but for resurrection. The Sensei would not be raised to worship him. They would live as mortals, shaped by suffering and chance, until one day they were ready. Ready not to rule, but to die. Ready not to fight, but to fulfill. And yet, the emotional weight of this possibility cannot be ignored. If the Emperor did father these beings, did he feel anything for them? Or were they just another tool in his labyrinthine plan? Did he ever regret their isolation? Their ignorance? Did he ever long to speak to them, to guide them, to explain why they were born into silence? These are questions the Imperium can never ask, because to ask them is to admit that its God is not just divine, but human. The horror of the Sensei isn't just what they are, it's what they imply. That the Emperor was once a man who walked among us, that he chose not to elevate his children, but to cast them into the void. That he trusted them, not with empire or armies, but with the ultimate burden, to die so that he might live again. And if he could love, then he could grieve. And if he could grieve, then he could fail. And if he could fail, then the future isn't written. In a galaxy without mercy, the idea of the Sensei becomes more than heresy, it becomes necessity. The Imperium is dying. It has been dying for 10,000 years, its heart rotting on the golden throne, its people ground beneath doctrine and decay. Every innovation is a blasphemy. Every act of mercy is a risk. Every truth is a weapon turned inward. The great machine of the Imperium endures not by wisdom, but by inertia. And that is why the Sensei must exist. They are not hope in the sentimental sense. They are not saviors on white steeds. They are the counterweight to madness, the failsafe. When the Emperor ascended, he became a beacon, but a dying one. The Astronomicon flickers. The warp storms grow. The gods of chaos howl louder every year. The dream of the Great Crusade has curdled into a nightmare of bureaucracy and blood. If nothing changes, humanity will drown in its own delusions. And yet the Imperium cannot change from within. It is incapable. To reform is to be accused. To question is to be burned. The Sensei, then, are the mechanism of transformation that does not require reform. They are not rebels. They are not revolutionaries. They are purpose encoded in flesh. They are the Emperor's final contingency, bypassing all the decaying hierarchies. They exist beyond the reach of ecclesiarch and inquisitor, beyond data and doctrine. Their very nature, psychic null, immune to corruption, born from humanity but set apart, is a signal. They are not an accident. They are the future's lever, the axis upon which a dying galaxy might be turned. Imagine a world where the Sensei are revealed, where they unite, where they sacrifice themselves not in glory but in silence, where their deaths ignite a god, not of war but of renewal. The Star Child's awakening is not a crusade, it is a resurrection. A second chance for humanity to find a path not paved in skulls but in stars. A vision so radical, so unthinkable, that it terrifies the powers of the Imperium into hiding it at any cost. But the necessity of the Sensei does not lie only in cosmic terms. They matter because they break the illusion that the Emperor must remain forever dying, that humanity's only path is through chains and fire. They represent a paradigm shift, from stagnation to possibility. They prove that something new can be born from the old, not through conquest, but through choice, through sacrifice, through the embrace of mortality, not its denial. They must exist, because without them, the only alternative is extinction. The Chaos Gods do not sleep, the Tyranids do not reason, the Necrons do not negotiate. The galaxy is filled with horrors that cannot be outlasted. The Emperor, in his infinite vision, may have understood this better than any. And so he sowed the Sensei, not to rule, not to fight, but to end the cycle, to offer a way out. And so their absence from canon, from official doctrine, from the hearts of the faithful, that absence is not proof of non-existence, it is the very sign of their importance. The Imperium does not erase trivia, it erases threats. The Sensei are necessary precisely because they are denied. They are what comes after empire, after the ashes, after the silence. If the Sensei were revealed to the galaxy, if even one stood in open daylight and declared their truth, the shockwave would be immeasurable. This isn't hyperbole. This is the shattering of a psychic dam, holding back 10 millennia of controlled belief, weaponized theology, and enforced stagnation. The Imperium does not merely believe the Emperor is a god, it is built on that belief. It is the mortar holding together a crumbling empire. To rip it away would cause not a collapse, but a cataclysm. Start with the ecclesiarchy. Their entire power structure hinges on the unassailable divinity of the Emperor. If he has mortal children, not primarchs, not constructs, but sons of flesh and silence, then he was never a god in the traditional sense. That would be enough to dismantle the Adeptus Ministorum's legitimacy overnight. Entire shrine worlds would revolt. Pilgrimage routes would become battlegrounds. The priesthood would split, some embracing the Star Child, others doubling down in terror. Fire and blood would follow. Then there's the Inquisition, the very institution tasked with preserving truth through suppression. How many inquisitors know of the Sensei already? How many have burned them without knowing? How many are silently complicit, hiding fragments of the Star Child myth in sealed vaults and forbidden archives? If the Sensei are made public, the Inquisition itself would fracture. Puritan and radical factions would draw blood. Ordos might turn on one another, each claiming they alone understand the Emperor's will. It would be another age of apostasy, but deeper, more virulent, more metaphysically dangerous. And the Adeptus Mechanicus? Imagine their reaction. The Sensei, by nature, defy understanding. They are anti-technology, anti-data. They exist outside the machine logic the tech priests revere. To admit their reality would be to admit ignorance. Heretic cults might rise overnight, claiming the Sensei as biological avatars of the Omnissiah. Forge worlds would go dark. Civil war would blossom, not from ambition, but from epistemological panic. The machine god would choke on the ghost of its own certainty. Even the Space Marines, what then? The Primarchs are worshipped as legends, their gene lines sacred. But what if another lineage, more subtle, more human, exists in parallel? Would some chapters abandon their vows and follow the Sensei as the Emperor's true heirs? Would others hunt them as abominations? The galaxy has seen brother turn against brother before. The Horus heresy began over loyalty to the Emperor's divinity. The rise of the Sensei could ignite another. Only this time, the line between heresy and salvation would be blurred beyond all recognition. And the people, the billions upon billions who live and die by rote worship, by fear, by sanctioned ignorance, how would they react to the truth that the Emperor is not just a god, but a father? That he may have destined himself to die? That salvation does not lie in obedience, but in transformation? For some, this would be liberation. For others, madness. In a galaxy this fragile, even hope is a weapon. This is why the Sensei remain hidden. Not because they are weak, but because their truth is stronger than the Imperium can bear. The Emperor knew this. Perhaps that is why he never spoke of them. He built a world designed to endure, not to heal. The Sensei are not meant to rule it. They are meant to end it. The Inquisition doesn't just fear the Sensei because of what they are. They fear what knowing them will do. Knowledge in this universe is not power. It is a virus, and the Sensei are the final, fatal infection. Not a disease, but a cure too powerful to survive contact. They are forgotten, erased from tomes, burned from memory, scoured from the stars, and yet we remember them. The Sensei, the sons of the Emperor. Not warriors of legend clad in gold, but quiet men who walk without banners, without legacy, without fear. They are the story the Imperium refuses to tell. The heresy too pure to be allowed to live. And that is precisely why they matter. In a galaxy that demands despair, they represent a different kind of rebellion. Not one of bolters and banners, but of blood and silence. They remind us that the Emperor was once human, that he may have loved, that he may have created not just weapons, but children. And that in those children lies the key to something the Imperium has forgotten. Rebirth. Not through conquest, not through fire, but through sacrifice freely given. The Sensei are not saviors. They are not meant to lead armies or build empires. They are meant to die, willingly together, in the hope that their father may rise again, not as a god of war, but as something greater, a god of humanity reborn, a being unbound by chains of worship, no longer entombed on a throne of silence. The Star Child is not a doctrine. It is a possibility, a sliver of light in a universe that has taught itself to fear illumination. And maybe that's the greatest tragedy, that those who carry this hope must remain hidden, that the Imperium, so desperate to survive, cannot allow itself to be saved. That truth must wear the mask of heresy, simply because it dares to promise something more than endless war. We may never know if the Sensei are real. Maybe they were only ever myth. Maybe they are long dead. Or maybe they are waiting for each other, for the right moment, for the stars to turn one final time. And maybe, just maybe, the next time a nameless man stands against the dark and the demons recoil in confusion, we will know what he is. Not a soldier, not a saint, but a son. So ask yourself this: what kind of future do you want for the Imperium? One of rusted devotion and eternal decay? Or one where the cycle breaks, where something new can be born from the ashes? Because in the end, the Sensei aren't just a story. They are a question, a challenge, a whisper that says, it doesn't have to be this way. And if that resonates with you, if the thought of the Emperor reborn not in vengeance but in renewal moves something in your soul, then you already carry the heresy the Inquisition fears most. There is a moment before every collapse when the structure still stands, the cathedral still sings, the gears still turn, but the cracks are there, hairline fractures in the walls of reality, spiderwebbing beneath the paint. If the Sensei were revealed, truly revealed, the galaxy would not shatter in an instant. It would tremble. Tremble with suspicion, with doubt, with awe. The fall would not be immediate. It would unfold slowly, like rot, like light breaking through old stained glass, illuminating things long hidden. The ecclesiarchy would be the first to react, not with unity, but with terror. Some cardinals would denounce the Sensei as demonic deceivers. Others would fall to their knees, weeping, seeing in them the Emperor's mercy at last. Schisms would erupt across shrine worlds. Pilgrimages would become riots. Zealots would burn their own cities. Yet others would form breakaway churches, silent movements, cloaked in secrecy, that begin to preach the word of the Star Child. These would spread like wildfire, not in fortress monasteries, but among the common folk, hive workers, miners, void-born navigators. Those who had never believed the Emperor truly spoke through stone and steel. They would whisper of a second coming, not proclaimed by priests, but by sons who bleed. Entire sects of the Inquisition would fracture. The Ordo Hereticus, once monolithic in its certainty, would become a battlefield of ideology. Some inquisitors, perhaps even powerful lords, would see the Sensei as harbingers of mankind's salvation, aligning themselves with forbidden cults, breaking centuries of oath in exchange for what they believe is ultimate purpose. Others would double down, ordering purges of entire sectors to ensure that no Sensei survives to be seen. The war would not be overt, not at first. But among the Inquisitors, the hidden war would intensify. Fought not with armies, but with assassinations, blackmail, psychic duels in the depths of null-void vaults. And in those moments when a Sensei is captured alive, there would be hesitation, questions, a sense that something ancient and unfinished is watching. The Adeptus Mechanicus would react with a bizarre blend of horror and ecstasy. To many tech priests, the Sensei are biological blasphemies, walking data voids, unable to be properly categorized or measured. Their null fields disrupt sacred rites of machine communion. But to others, the heretic enclaves, the data heresy covens on the far moons of the halo stars, they would be revelations. Experiments would begin in secret. Some would try to clone them. Others would dissect them. A few would worship them, calling them the true bridge between flesh and divinity, the missing node in the machine god's ascent. Mars would not burn, not yet, but the sparks of internal schism would fall like meteors across its surface. Among the Space Marines, the response would be unpredictable. Some chapters, particularly those loyal to the Ministorum or founded during the later founding waves, would see the Sensei as abominations, threats to the Emperor's legacy. They would take up arms. Others, especially the ancient chapters, the ones who remember the Great Crusade in blood and dream, might hesitate. The Blood Angels, so haunted by death and visions of salvation, might see something familiar in the Sensei. The Dark Angels, forever obsessed with hidden sins, might see them as absolution or further damnation. The Space Wolves, perhaps they'd laugh, perhaps they'd kneel. The Astartes would fracture, not along lines of command, but of belief. A new kind of heresy would be born, one not of ambition, but of revelation. And across the wider Imperium, on the hundreds of thousands of worlds that stretch across the void, the people would change. Slowly, unpredictably. On some planets, news of the Sensei would be suppressed, erased before it could be spoken. On others, the idea would spread like ink in water. Children would be named after them. Songs would be sung. A new calendar might even be declared, not in defiance, but in longing. A countdown, not to the end of days, but to a beginning. And where Sensei were discovered, they would not be crucified. They would be hidden, protected, worshipped, not with statues and temples, but with silent acts of love and loyalty. Some would become martyrs. Others would vanish into the warp, guided by fate and fire. This is the world between collapse and rebirth. The Imperium would not fall in a single night. It would decay like an old cathedral flooded with stars. The systems of power, inquisitorial cabals, ecclesiarchal thrones, mechanicus forge worlds, would all try to contain the truth. But it would be too late, because truth once seen cannot be unseen. And the Sensei once known would become the lens through which the entire history of the galaxy is reinterpreted. That is the scale of change they bring, not revolution, revelation. There is a hunger in the galaxy, and it is not for conquest, not for vengeance. It is deeper, older. A hunger for meaning. The Imperium speaks often of sacrifice, of duty, of the Emperor's will, but it does not explain why. Not truly. It gives rules, rituals, litanies. It gives martyrdom without revelation, death without transformation. And so the people cling to half-remembered myths, to saints who never die, to soldiers who return in fire, to sons who carry in their blood the key to something better. In the dark between stars, when the sermons end and the screams quiet, there is always the same question. Is this really all there is? That question is a wound. And the Sensei are the whisper of healing. Across the galaxy, even in the most doctrinaire corners of the Imperium, stories persist. Tales that begin the same way. A stranger walks into a war-torn village. A man who does not speak the creed, who does not kneel before the Aquila, who performs no miracles, casts no lightning, offers no blessings. And yet the demons cannot touch him. The madness flees from him. Where he walks, crops begin to grow, machines flicker to life, children stop crying. The stranger never stays. He simply nods and leaves. These tales are dismissed by the administratum as folk fantasy, but they are too consistent, too persistent. And what matters is not whether they are true, but that they are believed. They offer a vision not of a superman or a demigod or a conqueror, but of a man who simply is, silent, enduring, good. That is the shape of the Sensei myth. Not domination, but presence. Not savior, witness. There's a reason these figures resonate so deeply. The Imperium has primarchs and saints, but they are too large, too distant. The average citizen will never see Robot Guilliman, never hear Celestine's wings, but they can imagine a Sensei sitting beside them, quiet, tired, warm. They can imagine sharing bread, listening to his stories. They can imagine being one. The Sensei are not mythic because they are impossible. They are mythic because they are almost real. This is the psychological alchemy of the Sensei. They offer a bridge between mortality and purpose, between despair and transformation, not through power, but through enoughness. They do not change the galaxy by force. They change it by reminding us that the Emperor was once human. And so are we. If he could rise from flesh to light, then maybe there is something divine in all of us. Maybe the throne is not the final answer. Maybe salvation does not descend from gold towers, but rises from cracked soil. Even outside the lore, among the fans, the Sensei hold a strange place. They are not canonical in the modern sense, but they endure. Why? Because they fill a gap that the grimdark cannot satisfy. Warhammer thrives on nihilism, on blood and betrayal and endless war. But human imagination always seeks balance. For every titan, a rebel. For every demon prince, a silent son. The Sensei represent what is missing. Not weakness, but vulnerability. Not glory, but quiet defiance. They are a myth inserted by absence, longed for precisely because they have been denied. That longing is itself a heresy, but a beautiful one. And perhaps that is why the Sensei matter most, not because they are confirmed, but because they are not. Because they live in the borderland between belief and banishment. They make us ask questions. What does it mean to be the son of a god who never wanted to be worshipped? What does it mean to walk into death so that others might hope? What does it mean to be forgotten and still endure? In the end, the Sensei are not just a concept, they are a mirror. To the Emperor, to the Imperium, to us. And in that mirror, we see the truth that the galaxy refuses to speak. The future does not belong to gods, it belongs to those who remember how to be human. The warp does not lie. It may deceive, mutate, echo, scream, but it does not fabricate from nothing. It feeds on reality, on thought, on soul. It is the mirror and magnifier of all that lives. And yet there are ripples within it, distortions, blank spaces, voids that should not be. These are not caused by Blackstone, not created by null fields. They are living absences. And some have begun to call these by a name the warp itself seems to resist, Sensei. Among the navigators there are legends, accounts of regions in the Imperium where the tides do not obey their charts, where the screaming cacophony of the warp suddenly quiets, as though holding its breath, where demonic presences flinch away from what cannot be seen. The ancient guilds call these places calm scars, remnants perhaps of terrible psychic trauma. But some whisper that these are not scars. They are shadows, shadows cast by souls that have no reflection. If the Sensei truly exist, if they are psychic blanks of divine blood, then their influence must echo far beyond their physical form. The warp is a place of psychic resonance. Even a minor psyker leaves ripples. Even a strong emotion across millions can birth a god. But a being who absorbs psychic resonance rather than reflects it, who does not feed chaos but starves it by existing, that is not a ripple. That is a paradox. It is not only chaos that would recoil from such a being, the very structure of the warp would rebel. The Imperium is a place of extremes, of endless becoming. The Sensei are stasis incarnate, not peace but stillness. A single Sensei walking through the warp might create a corridor of silence, not because of power but because of perfect psychic cancellation. A reverse prophet, a walking contradiction. To the ruinous powers this is not just offensive, it is unthinkable. And that, perhaps, is why they must die. The Chaos Gods exist because of human thought, emotion, sin, excess. Khorne thrives on rage, Slaanesh on indulgence, Tzeentch on change, Nurgle on despair. The Sensei represent none of these. They do not hate, they do not covet, they do not scheme, they endure. Not stoically, humanly. They feel pain, sorrow, longing, but they do not amplify it. They do not feed it into the warp. They end it. In this light, the Sensei are not merely immune to chaos. They are its inverse, the negative space to its storm, the potential for a galaxy where the warp starves, where the gods of chaos shrivel into static, unformed thought. If enough Sensei exist, and if they gather, they might create a metaphysical breach, not in the Imperium, but in the very soul of the Imperium. A null resonance that cuts deeper than weapons ever could. Not a shield. A silence. This is not merely theory. Some among the Ordo Malleus have begun to suspect it. Forbidden logs recovered from demon hosts speak of the suns who blind us. Warp anomalies have been mapped that correspond to ancient Sensei sightings. A handful of Grey Knights have refused orders, citing dreams of shores without reflection. One librarian, before vanishing, wrote a single sentence across the walls of his cell in his own blood. They are coming, and the gods will forget how to scream. This is the deep terror that chaos would never allow voiced. That humanity could spawn something not stronger than the warp, but irrelevant to it. A kind of soul so alien that the gods cannot even comprehend how to corrupt it. A blankness so pure that demons cannot exist in its presence. The Sensei are not anti-chaos in the militant sense. They are what chaos cannot digest, cannot echo, cannot use. In this way, the Sensei may represent a metaphysical extinction event, not just for the Imperium's enemies, but for the very battlefield upon which the long war is fought. If enough of them awaken, and if they willingly offer themselves, not in defiance but in compassion, they might shift the emotional resonance of humanity itself. Deny the warp its feast, unmake the need for gods. The great game would end. The eye of terror might close, not with fire, with forgetting. And that, above all else, is why the galaxy must never know them. Not because they are dangerous to us, but because they are dangerous to the only things that have ever been truly eternal. To speak of the Sensei is to imagine cosmic purpose, grand design, and mythic destiny. But behind the myth, behind the prophecy and speculation, there are people. Not constructs, not archetypes, people. And they live in silence. They live in shadows. They live half in the world, half outside it. Never quite belonging, never fully breaking, never fully dying. What is it like to be a Sensei? Not the heroism, not the speculation, but the reality. It begins with loneliness. Not the kind born of distance, but of dissonance. From an early age, a Sensei feels wrong, not cursed, not like the pariahs who repel all life, but different. They feel time stretch unnaturally. Wounds that should kill fade overnight. Lovers age and die. Friends turn gray. But the Sensei remains, unchanged, unaging, uncertain. At first, it is mistaken for blessing. But centuries of watching others wither while they endure turns blessing into weight, into grief. Then comes the silence, not just social, psychic. The Sensei are blanks, and the warp recoils from them. Psychers cannot read their thoughts. Daemons cannot see them clearly. Even emotions, strong, chaotic, beautiful, seem to dim around them. They walk through miracles and madness untouched, immune, but also alone. There is no connection in the warp for them, no chorus of souls, no divine touch. They do not dream in colors. They do not hear the Emperor's voice. Faith slides off them like rain on stone. They are cut off from the very currents that make life vibrant in the Imperium. Worse still is the unknowing. Most Sensei do not awaken with knowledge of their origin. They do not receive visions. They are not guided by saints or visions of Terra. They live normal lives until they don't, until the first time they walk through a warp storm unscathed, until they stare into the eyes of a greater daemon and it fears them, until they realize that everyone around them grows old, dies, and leaves them behind. They live lifetimes before they understand they are not normal. And even then, there is no one to explain, no tome, no mentor, only fragments, whispers, doubt. A Sensei often wanders, not because they are cursed, but because they are searching for purpose, for connection, for truth. Some become mercenaries, seeking meaning through violence. Others become healers, trying to atone for some ancestral sin they do not remember. A few retreat entirely, becoming monks on distant moons, hoping silence will offer clarity. They do not find peace, only patterns, the same old story of moving through a galaxy that is allergic to their existence. Then comes the moment of discovery. Some never reach it, but others, a handful, learn the truth. Through ancient scripts or encounters with forbidden cults, or through contact with the Sensei Knights, they learn they are not accidents. They are sons, not of any man, of him, the Emperor, not the God Emperor, not the throne-bound corpse, the man. They learn they are part of a plan older than the Imperium itself, and that knowledge hits like a spear through the soul. Because what are they meant to do with it? They cannot announce themselves. They would be killed, or worse, studied, tortured, sanctified against their will. They cannot trust most who would call themselves allies. They cannot even fully embrace the prophecy, because it requires their death, not in battle, in ritual, willing, complete. They are born to be erased so something greater can be born, not worshipped, not remembered, just gone. This is the paradox of the Sensei soul, immortal, blank but destined to end, not by force, by choice, and not to save themselves, but to light a path for others. They are not heroes in the traditional sense. They will not have statues, they will not be named. The only future they are promised is anonymity. And yet, many of them would choose it. Not for glory, but because they feel, in the marrow of their timeless bones, that something in the galaxy must change, and that if their death, their erasure, can buy it, then so be it. This is the true tragedy of the Sensei. Not that they are forgotten, but that they remember everything, every friend, every world, every loss, and still choose to vanish. Thank you for joining us on this journey into forgotten lore, impossible truths, and forbidden hope. If you believe the Sensei should return, or if you're just hungry for more tales that the galaxy wants us to forget, then subscribe, because here we remember what they want us to forget.